Attorney Amihan April Alcazar, sa lahat ng bumubuo ng The Education Channel at sa ating mga manunood, magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Una sa lahat, nais kong batiin si Attorney April para sa paglulunsad ng kanyang kahanga-hangang proyektong The Education Channel. Mahalaga ang episode natin ngayong gabi dahil ito ang premier broadcast dito sa ating bansa. Sa pamamagitan ng programang ito, hindi lamang tayo naghahatid ng edukasyon sa mga mag-aaral ng bansa. Tinatalakay din natin ang mahalagang usapin. Ngayon gabi ay tatalakay natin ang estado ng edukasyon sa bansa na humaharap sa matinding hamon na dulot ng COVID-19. Para sa akin, hindi lamang ang pagpapatuloy ng edukasyon ang dapat nating tutukan sa new o better normal. Mahalaga ring talakayin natin kung paano nating iaangat ang kalidad ng edukasyon sa bansa. Paano ba magiging mas matatag ang sektor ng edukasyon sa harap ng mga krisis na tulad ng kinakaharap natin? Samahan po natin si Attorney April sa pagtalakay at pagsuri ng mga usaping ito. Bilang chairman ng Senate Committee on Basic Education, Arts and Culture, ako po ay inyong katawang sa ating pagsisikap na iangat ang kalidad ng ating edukasyon. Maraming salamat at magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Stay safe.
as well, all the guests coming from the industry, the education. So since last year, the 196 organizations and leaders, right, they make jumps from 1 to 2, right, or even 3. Can you imagine the number of people are going through mental health issues? So that's how will we do this? So we research, that there are certain things that have already been implemented like this as a way to inform as well other leaders in the other agencies. I love this, coming from the Department of Trade and Industry. They're saying that when the nation develops its people, the people is developed. So thank you for today. God bless you. Thank you so much.
And we're happy that for the second quarter of 2021, we were able to among our workers to go out, especially those who have not been vaccinated. Overseas po, alam naman po natin na the pandemic has an impact. We speak about 2 million na rin po yung atin pong na-release.
So these are the things that we would like to invite everyone, if these are very important to you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday night, and we're here at AAA Live, where your academic goals are advanced and achieved. So this is your host, Attorney Amian April M. Alcazar. And so tonight, we will be having a very good segment of interviews as well as features from the United States, where we have a very good connection. I'll be presenting on the intercultural nursing concepts applied to the health and hygiene practices of the Alangan Mangyan community in Bato, Banilad, Oriental Mindoro, Philippines. So I'll be wearing my hat here as a collaborator with the Philippine Association of Extension Program Implementers, which is an organization of institutional members of higher education institutions in the Philippines, functioning for one of the main functions of the higher education institution, namely extension services, the other functions being curriculum and instruction, research, and production. So with the conduct of extension services, we were able also to conduct a research out of the extension activity. And the impetus for this is really to look into the effect of actually climate change was kind of the impetus for this research because of the occurrence of typhoons in the Philippines or disasters, which lent itself to extension activities being conducted by the organization together with the government organizations. And then at the same time, also its effect on the delivery of social services, namely in education and health. So I'll just provide a little bit of a background as I go along. So here, first we begin with the organization. So next, okay. So I think we have to focus first on the subject of this particular research, which is really the indigenous people. And the legal basis for this, eventually for the enactment of legislation in the Philippines, is actually Convention number 169 concerning indigenous and tribal people in independent countries. So this revised the earlier International Convention on Indigenous and Tribal People from 1957. And actually you had the international organizations contributing to these revisions. So eventually, the Philippines in the 1990s enacted several landmark legislation as provided in our 1987 Constitution, recognizing the rights of minorities and indigenous peoples in the Philippines. So I will only be focusing in one of this particular legislation. The others I will just mention. One was the creation of the autonomous region for Muslim Mindanao because of in southern Philippines the presence of the minority Muslim population. But that's for an autonomous region wherein they were granted the right for self-governance. Based on their minority rights. The other one was the creation of the Cordillera Autonomous Region in northern Philippines. Again, this was for the northern tribes. And lastly, this was the landmark legislation for Republic Act 8371, which is the Indigenous Peoples' Right Act, creating the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples in 1997 to encompass all the other indigenous peoples in the Philippines, other than the two that I already mentioned. So this particular commission, the mandate is really to try to protect and promote the interests and the well-being of these ICCs, the indigenous cultural communities or the indigenous peoples with respect to their indigenous culture. And the vision is that through this advocacy, then the indigenous people whose rights and multidimensional well-being can have their rights recognized, respected, and promoted in view of their possible contribution to nation building. And this National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, so it's the primary government agency through which these groups can seek government assistance, and of course, it's the medium by which they can be granted that assistance. Now, of course, the indigenous peoples, as identified by the NCIP, has many concerns. So it will be very lengthy to discuss all of the thematic concerns of indigenous people. So I will really only focus on the two aspects as discussed in the research, and I will just peripherally refer to these concerns if they had some relation to my discussion. So really, the concern of the research was on the delivery of government services, specifically on education and health, and also the lack of education or awareness about human rights, specifically the right to education and the right to health and well-being of the indigenous people. However, I will peripherally refer to the first concern of the indigenous people in the Philippines, which is the formal recognition of ancestral domains as it relates to education and health. Then let me just describe briefly about the Mangyan indigenous community of Mindoro and where is the location of their ancestral domain or the area which they originally inhabited in the Philippines. So the location of Mindoro Island is in so-called Region 4B. It's 45 kilometers south of Batangas province and 130 kilometers south of Manila, the capital city. So it doesn't seem to be very far really from the capital city, and yet it is bounded by all of these waterways bays by the Verde Island Passage, Maestro del Campo Island, and the Tabla Strait on the east, and the Semirara Island on the south. So the whole island is divided into two parts. Oriental Mindoro is the northern part, and Occidental Mindoro is the southern part of the island. So the particular tribes that I'm speaking about, Alangan Mangyans, so there are different tribes that have been recognized and identified by the NCIP. So they are located in northern part of the island in Oriental Mindoro, and they encompass an area comprising 4 towns: Baco, San Teodoro, Nauhan, and Victoria, and they are considered as the original inhabitants of Mindoro Island. Now, specifically, the tribe that we have worked with on this extension activity, which became the subject of the research, called the Alangan Mangyan tribe, is located in the village of Banilad, Baco, 15 kilometers north of Calapan, the capital of Oriental Mindoro, inhabiting an area near Mount Halcon, which is a mountain in Oriental Mindoro, which I will be discussing later on, and they are the subject of this particular study. Now, just two interesting facts about the Mangyan indigenous community. First is they are the indigenous community in the Philippines which had a written record of script, which was unlike the other indigenous communities in the Philippines. And secondly, this island, even though it was very near Manila, was so isolated because of the waterway that separated it from the main island of Luzon, that in 1974, a Japanese soldier was found in the hills of Oriental Mindoro, where the Mangyans are living. So he has been in the jungle for 35 years, thinking that the war had not ended. And so he was just discovered. Peace-loving indigenous community, so that when there was encroachment and settlers came to the island, they eventually moved from the shores of the island, because it's of course surrounded by water, and eventually inhabited the area beside the hillside or the mountain of Mount Halcon. Mountain of Mount Halcon. Now, the conceptual framework that we utilize for this is the framework for intercultural nursing, and we define it as when it is applied to healthcare workers treating patients as unique individuals and considering their particular cultural needs. So what is really the requirement for intercultural nursing is cultural competence, in that you may be able to provide the best possible care to the patients while respecting their cultural heritage in terms of their beliefs, race, and values. So we were able to actually conduct that during our extension activity in the community. And then from there, then we were able to actually take note of what was the cultural heritage with respect to health and hygiene, and how that could be respected, as well as make some recommendations for its possible adoption or improvement of the community. Then let me go into implemented during the time when we conducted our extension activities. So in 2019, so Typhoon Kamuri in the Philippines, we also name our typhoons with the local name. So it was called Typhoon Tisoy, was the 20th tropical cyclone to strike the Philippines in 2019. So it came as we were already suffering from several emergencies and disasters related to public health concerns. So we had the measles and polio outbreak during that year, and also the earthquake. So this particular typhoon hit on December 2 and 3, 2019, and it was subsequently followed by Typhoon Fanfon in the 3rd week of December, the eruption of Taal volcano on January 12, 2020, and then the COVID pandemic in February 2020. Then in March 2020, the whole country was shut down with the strictest and most stringent quarantine restrictions. So because of this, of course, there was prioritization in terms of the resources for public health concerns. So there were implications on the implementation of possible interventions related to this particular study and the recommendations to the local government. So the extension activity was the pathway by which we were able to conduct the research on the health and hygiene practices observed by this particular Alangan Mangyan community, because the school that we supported eventually became the evacuation center of the 90 families whose homes were destroyed during the Typhoon Kamuri. So what was the relation between these practices and the incidence of disease in the aftermath in the aftermath when they stayed in the evacuation center. So that was the subject of our study. And what recommendations based on intercultural nursing concepts can be made to the community to improve its health and hygiene practices. So what was the description of the extension activity? So different organizations participated in the extension activity and research related to the disaster relief work in the aftermath of Typhoon Kamuri. So basically, of course, we had to conduct the relief and rehabilitation work for 3 days exclusively, and then the research for those of us who were able to stay for the whole time, then we conducted the research while we were also involved with the relief operations. So the organizations involved was San Lorenzo Ruiz Learning Center, which was the extension school, so it only had 4 classrooms, but because it was the only concrete physical structure in the village, became the main hub of the evacuation center. Then the areas, which were agricultural areas surrounding the school, became the area where the makeshift huts were placed for the other families who had to be evacuated because their homes were destroyed. Then the Buhay at Kinabukasan Development Foundation, of course, since it was already providing the support to finance the elementary school for around 100 school children, also raised more funds in order to support the logistical needs of these extension activities. And then our association, the Philippine Association of Extension Program Implementers from the higher education institution, comprising of school administrators, faculty or students, became the volunteers for this extension activity, and the period of implementation was from December 10 to 17 in 2019. So this was the observations and findings of the study. So based on the cultural heritage of the Mangyans regarding health and hygiene, so in their heritage and belief system, so health and wellness meant harmony with creation, which involves being able to obey. So I will explain why I use this term obey, and respect the creator of the forest, the land, and its resources. So basically, they do believe that the environment is maintained by the laws of nature. And the people incur sickness when they offend the creator by intervening, or there is intervention with the laws of nature and the spirits who take care of the area. And Mount Halcon, the place where they are inhabited in the foothills, the area of their ancestral domain called Sinyoldan, is a sacred mountain that they consider, but it is being destroyed due to lack of conservation efforts and no unified plan for its protection. So normally there will be a comprehensive development plan that will be submitted by the provincial government and even the local government of the town or the city where it is located. But in this particular case, there is no particular plan for the conservation of Mount Halcon as ancestral domain of the indigenous people of the Mangyan community. So this condition of the Mount Halcon nowadays, they believe, results in the incidence of illnesses in their community. Of course, this could be partially explained because of the ecosystem and the habitat, the natural habitat is no longer conserved as it once was. So that is their belief according to their value system. Then what were their cultural practices that affected their health and hygiene? So firstly, in the traditional house, because it's a very closely knit indigenous community, they would have the balay lakoy, or the traditional house, where 20 families would be clustered in one place, resulting, of course, as we understand it, because of the communal living lifestyle of this indigenous community, in this possible spread of viruses or communicable disease. So this is exactly what happened in the aftermath of Typhoon Kamuri, when they were evacuated, and they used the school as an evacuation center, which is not really designed in terms of its facility or usage for such purposes. And it was densely packed with the evacuees, and the area surrounding it had no facilities to really serve the community. Then after the series of disasters, as I've mentioned, the current situation is that 3 families actually cluster in one household, and those affected by the Typhoon Kamuri altogether were like around 90 families with an average number of 6 or 7 family members. Also, there were no consistent practice of hygiene, specifically for the bathing and the dental care, since the water source is a mountain stream utilized for various purposes such as agricultural, irrigation, washing, bathing, and drinking. So the water, the source of water is really problematic in the village. Then the source of food, of course, is they're actually they are involved in subsistence agriculture. So consisting of the kaingin or the slash and burn method of agriculture. So before, when there were no settlers in the island, they could just move from one part of the island to another after using the slash and burn method. But because they do not really have this highly mechanized form of agriculture, then this is subsistence farming, sufficient only to sustain themselves, but of course, they are not able to actually grow the crops that is needed for proper nutrition. So it really results in malnutrition. So they already have a poor medical condition or physical well-being to begin with. Then specifically for the concern of the vulnerable members of the community, so we looked into the prenatal, natal, and postnatal practices of the community, and specifically on the cultural practices regarding childbirth, because this is vital to the, of course, continuity of the indigenous community. But they had several practices such as not taking a bath after childbirth because they thought that it would result in like fevers for the mother, or using guava leaves as antiseptic in order to treat like the wound after normal delivery. The remote location itself, so even though I mentioned it was like 15 kilometers north of the capital city, but this is through unpaved roads, so it would probably, it takes around 2.5 hours by foot to get to Calapan, the capital city. So they normally would not have access to prenatal checkups or care prior to delivery. And of course, there's the presence of older women who perform the delivery acquired through experience with no actual training. So we could say that, of course, based on the intercultural nursing concepts, these observations may be considered as unhygienic, septic, and risky for both mother and child, which actually results in a high maternal child mortality rate. Then they have this reliance on medicinal plants found in the environment as palliative cares, and this is actually administered in connection with number 7, which is the observance of rituals that are believed to cure the illness. So I will cite here some of these healing rituals that were performed to remove illnesses. So for example, Agpansula is a ritual of prayer to God, offering a pig or a chicken, which is dark or black in color, and so we would always say that it's like native chickens. Then the Pangahuan or Panatan is laying promises to Kapuan Agalapat or God because of the illnesses that were incurred by members of the community. Then Agpamana is hitting bad spirits with the use of bow and arrow, so they still practice archery. Agloop is the burning of materials, food, and other things that might cause discomfort to relieve from pain. So for example, if you ate something and then you had a stomach ache, then part of the ritual would be like to burn the food that caused your stomach ache. Salabong will be driving away the bad energy from other people or unseen creatures. So for example, you met someone for the first time and then afterwards you had a terrible headache, then probably they were saying that, oh, the person that you met today had this bad energy that was transmitted to you. So this ritual would have to be performed. And then the apagwala is the restoring of good energy of a sick person if they were ill. And so there will be some incantations given in order to restore the good energy of a sick person. They also had like medicinal plants that were found around the Mount Halcon. So this is going to be administered together with the performance of the ritual. So lubidan or lubigan, stem and leaves are used to remove stomach ache, for example, or alibakwan or leaves are placed on the forehead to remove the headache or the fever. And as I said about like getting the stomach ache, the bark of the tree is boiled to be drunk for a loose bowel movement, as well as sibuka, which should be drunk, boiled and drunk for aching body and lack of red blood cells. Of course, one doesn't know whether you actually had anemia, only that you probably looked pale and so had to drink this particular boiled concoction. Then mamis, ikaw, or buyo, or leaves and stem are boiled for colds and gas pains. Other plants included, and that might be familiar to some of our colleagues here from the Philippines, kulutan or damong kambing. The leaves are grinded and put on the boil for colds.
Then Mayana, which is a very endemic in the Philippines. The leaves are boiled and drank for asthma. So if you had like some respiratory problems or breathing difficulties, tibawa together with coconut oil, the stem is placed on the injured bones. So balagasa, or the leaves, are heated and placed on the wound after normal delivery of women, and kusor or duso, or stem and leaves, are placed on the wound to remove foreign material. So the rituals and the medicinal plants were administered together in order to address like the illnesses. However, of course, we had to actually have interventions done during the relief operation. So first was the distribution of essential hygiene goods such as soap, toothpaste, and shampoo, and of course the equivalent items, because these are consumable. So we know that once it is consumed, they would need to address this concern. Of course, we know that salt could be used for dental care. Gugo is a nature ingredient for shampoo, and coconut oil has myriad uses for addressing certain illnesses. And we also had like some learning session to teach proper bathing in the stream for children, at least for the children, to address the hygiene problems. And 3 and 4, the hand washing before and after meals was also in conjunction with the construction of the bamboo funnel for drinking water. And then for some injuries or wounds, taught how to make a tourniquet from wooden sticks and old wounds, and teaching about menstrual cycle and childbirth for women to address some of their vulnerable concerns. So our recommendations were to actually be implemented through the San Lorenzo Ruiz Learning Center because of the presence of 2 teachers there of the center. So 1 to 3 could be administered by the teachers themselves, such as providing cooking demonstration using plants from the environment as food to improve nutrition, and to have a learning session on how to address the problem of child marriages from a health perspective, because of course we respect that particular practice of the community. The often occurrence was that grade 4, 5, or 6 girl pupils will drop out of school because of the child marriage. And normally, of course, how to address it is like the occurrence of, stating that the occurrence of menstruation is not necessarily a signal of readiness for childbirth. Of course, there's no learning session on contraception because it's against the laws of nature based on the value system. And to provide a learning session to teach cleaning of wounds and provision for treatment using medicinal plants. Now, 4 and 5 were like more difficult because it's really needed to have like more intervention, in the sense that during times of calamity, when a state of calamity is declared. So in the case of Typhoon Kamuri, 4 regions in the Philippines comprising of 9 provinces were declared in the state of calamity. So there would be funds coming from the national government, course to the local government units, or the provincial government, and there is an office called the Disaster Risk and Reduction Management System, which addresses the needs of the those affected by the disasters. So how they actually do all of this, they have preventive evacuation, they have provisions for social services. So none of these services were actually coursed to the indigenous community because they comprise a larger political subdivision of the barangay, and they're just like one of the areas comprising the barangay. So really how to do all of this coordination when the community members are mostly illiterate or not able to really communicate with the barangay. So that is one particular intervention and extension activity that we wanted to do, to coordinate with the local government unit for social services to also be extended to members of the indigenous community during the state of calamity declarations. And of course, it was always our intention to coordinate volunteer efforts of healthcare workers to conduct monthly medical missions to the island. However, the problem was the subsequent month when we planned to begin these medical missions, then there was the Taal volcano eruption, which prevented us from like traveling to Mindoro Island. So we had to redirect our efforts towards more logistical or financial support given in order for some health workers to make some visits there if they were already based in Mindoro Island. So the conclusion here is that the health and well-being of the indigenous community is a public health concern on the local and the national government levels, and therefore needs to be addressed because it is in conjunction with their rights to health. Now, the right to education here, why it comes into play, is that it is the policy of the national government, of the Philippine government, to actually utilize all public schools and their facilities as evacuation centers in times of disaster. But such facilities and school buildings are not actually designed to address the needs of those stricken by disaster. So the Philippine Association of Extension Program Implementers comes out with a report every year to the Commission on Higher Education for the improvements of the extension activities to be conducted by the higher education institution. And definitely, we recommended to revisit the national policy of the government in utilizing the facilities of the public educational sector as well as the resources like the personnel. Usually, the school administrators will be the first one communicated to in terms of disaster in order to mobilize the members of the academic community, but they are not really the most trained insofar as addressing disaster risk and reduction management, which could definitely be handled by utilizing or appropriating more budget by the national government to address these disasters, because they happen very frequently in the Philippines. And one of the main vulnerable points really that is brought about by climate change is the eventual change in the cycle of our wet and dry season. So whereas before, probably like even 30 to 40 years ago, our typhoon season was from June to September every year. Now it's been extended from June until January the following year. So we have a very short dry season from February until May, until again this whole cycle occurs every year, and so it must be addressed. And of course, with respect to the vulnerable and marginalized sectors, such as the indigenous communities whose physical well-being and medical condition is already vulnerable to begin with, then these conditions are exacerbated because of their lack of access to the support services of the government. So thank you very much for listening to the presentation.
Okay, so good day and good evening, everyone. So once again, I am Ilumina de Vierne from the University of Pasig City, currently the Vice President for the Administration of the University of Pasig, and I am a registered nurse and taking up my PhD in nursing at University of St. Paul, Manila, Philippines. So it is a privilege to present to you this study entitled Contribution of Public Institution to Public Health Education, focusing on e-learning. So for my introduction, in today's age, where the use of technology is trending, at work, at school, and in other activities in life, most people have realized the need to be updated or become experts in the use of technology. In this era of technology, healthcare professionals, particularly in low-income countries, should have at least minimum level of digital competency if technology is to be applied. Studies have identified the need to bridge the digital skill gap of healthcare providers and educators in academic institutions in order to transfer technology to the point where health service quality is maintained. However, most of these studies do not specify in detail where the critical digital skill gap lays. By itself, digital literacy is a congregating and evolving concept through the time and advancement in technology, and there is a need to maintain an up-to-date level of digital skill. The digital skill, according to Martin 2006, is not just a threshold one could achieve through certification and diploma alone at a point in time. Rather, it is a temporary and context-based concept referring only to the current level of performance. As a result, assessing the level of digital competency should be conducted in parallel with the evolving changes in the digital environment. This study focused on the contribution of public institutions to public health education, whose impetus was the incidence of the COVID-19 pandemic as experienced in the Philippines. The collaborators the collaborators for these projects are the University of the Philippines, College of Public Health, which is the Simeo Regional Center for Public Health, Hospital Administration, Environmental and Occupational Health, and the Better Health Program, which is funded through the United Kingdom's Prosperity Fund and identified Pasig City and Iloilo City as two of the anchor subjects of the research that serves to be the research center. So the City Health Department of Pasig City Government of Pasig is the respondents, and the University of Pasig as the respondent and the researcher. Pasig City is one of the constituent cities of the National Capital Region, which is an urban sprawl of 13 million. The city has around 800,000 residents, but since the city is a major business, commercial, and industrial area, it has a daytime of 1.2 million. It is a highly densely populated city comprising 6% of the total population of the metropolis. The goal of this research was to provide e-learning courses for health professionals in local government and health educators in colleges and universities, and it entails adapting training courses to an e-learning format and upgrading online trainers' digital competencies. E-learning is a combination of content and instructional methods delivered via computer to facilitate the development of knowledge and skills. It uses both offline and online interactive technologies to aid in the acquisition and comprehension of knowledge. There are several approaches to e-learning, including online learning, web-based instruction, computer-assisted instructions, and virtual classrooms. The beauty of e-learning is that it is one-of-a-kind option for delivering online learning to health professionals in local government units and academe, regardless of geographic location or time. It allows to distribute both learning and information dynamically and instantly. In this study, I used a survey on the digital competency of the respondents. The coverage of the digital competency survey are the following. First, the digital technology and literacy, followed by the information and data literacy, communications and collaboration, digital content creation, safety, and problem solving. The researchers' respondents are the following. 1,000 health-related employees of the city government of Pasig, including the faculty members of the University of Pasig, faculty of medical practitioners, nurses and nursing aides, allied medical professionals, and ancillary health staff workers. The aim of this study is to determine the level of digital competency of the respondents, which serve as the basis of the development of e-learning courses and determine what instructional design shall be adopted for the course. On how the research was carried out, the researcher first obtained approval from the Pasig Local Government Unit, specifically the City Health Department and the President of Pasig City University, for the conduct of study, including the consent or agreement of the respondents. The researcher used the digital competency survey to collect data, combine the data, and analyze the data. The output of the analysis was the plan for constructing or creating e-learning modules and courses. The designed modules will be piloted once this study will be finished with a focus group first. The results of the pilot study will indicate if the learning modules should be revised or not. And when everything is in place, the execution of skills and manpower development trainers can begin. So I just want to show to all of you the content of the survey form. So maybe we can assess ourselves. You can start assessing yourselves also while I am discussing the content of the survey form, which the respondents will be accomplishing. So first part is the gadget and technology diagnostic. And it is important that we know whether the respondents have access to digital devices and platforms, desktop, laptop, smartphone, or tablet. So whether they have access to internet, the office, the smartphone, and what apps are they using? Are they using chat apps, GPS or navigator apps, mobile games, social media, newsfeed, or others? Are they using social media and collaborative platforms like FB or Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp, Zoom, MS Team, Skype, that just like what we are using, and others? And then the number of years, the years of usage for numbers 1 to 4. How long are they using this digital or technologies? For the next option or portion of the survey is the digital literacy assessment. In here, their ability to use the computer, ability to use the internet, their ability to use digital technology, their ability to search on the web, and their speed in typing is being assessed. So they will indicate whether they are very good, or their competency is just acceptable or poor. For information and digital literacy, so this is answerable by yes or no. So the respondents can say yes or no in these questions, whether they can articulate information needs, search for data, information, and content in digital environment, or I have no access to digital content at all. I create and update personal search strategies. I use internet use engines to find relevant content. I do not use advanced searches to identify digital content, like, for example, the Google Advanced Search, reverse image search. I adapt my search strategies to identify sources which I can modify. And in addition to search engines, I use variety of other sources. And in here, are they able to provide guidance to colleagues on effect, search strategies, and other sources? So for the next portion is the communication and collaboration. So these are answerable by yes or no again. I am aware of behavior norms and how file using digital technologies and interacting in digital environments. So in here, the internet etiquette, the online meeting protocols. So usually when we attend webinars, we are being instructed to mute our microphones when we are not talking, or place our camera on off. So these are some of the etiquettes. I interact through a variety of digital technologies and understand appropriate digital communication means for a given context. I share data information and digital content with others through appropriate digital technologies. I participate in society through the use of public and private digital services. I use digital tools and technologies for collaborative processes for co-construction and co-creation of resources and knowledge. Example here are the use of social media, mobile gadgets, and computer accessories. Next. Okay. So another thing is I do not co-create learning resources with colleagues. This means he is the only one preparing the learning resources. I include a range of interactive elements and games into my self-created resources. I use digital technologies to invent or explore new approaches to collaborative learning. So in here, they are being asked on what digital tools and technologies do they use. So they need to specify. And then they need also to specify their reasons why they prefer to co-create. For the digital content creation, so it is still answerable by yes or no. So they are being asked if they can create and edit digital content in different formats. If they no longer make edits to pre-existing digital materials, they just copy and paste it. I understand different licenses attributed to digital resources and know the permissions granted to me as regards modifying resources. I cannot comfortably write code. I create digital resources using animations, links, multimedia, or interactive elements. And for safety, I know about digital safety and security measures, like, for example, the setting up of passwords, restricting access to documents, and have due regards to reliability and privacy. I do not set up passwords and change privacy settings of digital materials. This means the documents in their desktops or in their computers are accessible to everyone. I am able to avoid health risks and threats to physical and psychological well-being while using digital technologies. I am aware of the environmental impact of digital technologies and their use, and how do they avoid risks and threats using digital technologies. For problem solving, I can identify needs and technological responses. I use digital technologies in creative ways, example, using formula in documents. When I encounter problems with my device, I do not know to fix the issue, or do they know how to troubleshoot when problem arise. I am able to process a computable problem into sequential and logical steps as a solution for human and computer system. For the last is the training diagnostics. So, have you received training in e-learning? What other digital literacy skills and competencies not mentioned in the survey would like to develop? What topics would you like to be discussed on e-learning conversion course? And do you have training course that you would like to convert to e-learning format? So these are the contents of the competency or of the digital competency survey. So I hope you're able to assess yourselves on this competency survey. So I would just like to share to you this picture when we had our initial meeting. So the members of the University of the Philippines College of Public Health, me, and of course Dr. Amihan April Alcazar. So included in this is Dr. Amihan Alcazar because she's one of the approving university official to proceed with the research. So this is all about this study. Thank you very much.
So I hope that you really enjoyed our episode here at AAA Live, where your academic goals are advanced and achieved. So we're airing every Wednesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. So you can like, follow, and subscribe to all our social media platforms here at the Education Channel on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, of course. So till next time, of course, we'd like to invite everyone to become virtual interns, specifically for the Education Channel and our corporate sponsors. So till next time, and this is Attorney Amian April M. Alcazar, your host. Stay safe and healthy, everyone, and good night.